Attention women's health professionals, the next round of FAMM is just around the corner. Classes start on October 4th. FAMM is the perfect program for busy women's health professionals who want to offer fertility awareness charting support in their practice. FAMM cuts out all the fluff and only focuses on what you need to serve your clients better. Each module, homework assignment, in-class training, and chart review session is there for a reason. Where will you be 9 months from now? With a FAMM certification, you'll have a brand new skill set that will allow you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and vital sign in your practice. Your confidence in analyzing and interpreting menstrual cycle charts will be at a level you can't even imagine today. And you'll have a brand new offering in your business that will allow you to reach more clients. This knowledge is truly life-changing. Transform your practice in 9 months. You won't regret it. Join us this October in FAMM. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive to apply today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 486. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode in my FAMM Practitioner series. I'm sharing my interview with Nikki Zavitz, and we take a deep dive into the hormonal birth control pill. And Nikki shares her experience going on the pill at a young age and how it essentially robbed her of many years of charting. And this is something that comes up a lot in my work, because when you're a grown woman already, sometimes with children of your own, and you're discovering fertility awareness at a later age and realizing all of the different aspects of the cycle and how it relates to your health. And also, especially if you experienced negative side effects on the pill and potentially didn't know that the pill was the contributing factor. And that's a lot like Nikki's situation. She really goes through and talks about how she felt about it and how she's reconciled it, and how knowing now the different side effects that she was experiencing, but at the time not being able to make those connections, how that ultimately is spilling over into the work that she's doing now with her clients. And so I'm really happy that we were able to talk about this and just put out this conversation into the world, because I'm of the opinion that we all do the best with what we know at the time. And so although it's hard sometimes not to go back and beat ourselves up and, I should have, would have, could have, wish I didn't, etc. It's also really important to have compassion for your younger self and remember that she really was doing the best that she could with the information that she had available to her at the time. So with that said, let me share a little bit about Nikki, and then we're going to jump into today's episode. Nikki Zavitz is a menstrual cycle, fertility awareness, and body literacy educator, as well as a certified teacher who founded Pretty River Red Tent, an educational hub for menstruality education and support for pre-puberty to post-menopause. She is passionate about empowering women and girls to embrace and celebrate the power and rhythms of their cyclical nature. Nikki is a certified menstruality mentor and soon to be FAMM certified. She creates and facilitates one-of-a-kind group and one-to-one workshops, courses, and programs in person as well as online, and offers support and resources for all things menstrual. She's also a mama of 3 incredible daughters who she spends her days cyclically living and learning with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Nikki. And I'm excited to be here today with Nikki Zavitz. She is a member of our FAMM program. And at the time we're recording, it's crazy, but we're almost done. We're in our last official month of the program. So we've been working together for the past 8.5 to 9 months. And I feel like this is just such a fun opportunity to talk a little bit about your story and all that great stuff. So welcome to the show, Nikki.
Thanks for having me. My lifelong dream. I can check it off the box.
Amazing. I love that I can do that service, right? I'm helping women with their bucket lists. Well, I'd love to start with one of my favorite questions, because it's just become one of the signature, Fertility Friday questions for these episodes. And so, if I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. You can let us know, how old were you when you had your first period, and kind of take us through, did you use hormonal birth control, and what led you to fertility awareness, and eventually what led you to want to introduce the cycle as a diagnostic tool with your clients?
Yeah, it's so interesting when I think about like how I entered into womanhood compared to how I embody that now as a 42-year-old woman and mother. But as a young girl, I was a late bloomer and I didn't get my period till the summer before high school. So that's about 14. And I was very oblivious, and not maybe oblivious isn't the right word. I just had I had no idea what was going on with my body. I didn't really have a lot of conversations about it with my mom, and a bunch of my friends had it. And I think I even told them I had it too and didn't have it. It was one of those situations but it wasn't like I wanted it. I just wanted to fit in. And yeah, when I did actually get my period, I didn't tell anyone. So I didn't tell my mom, I didn't tell anybody. So it was very secretive. And I just remember feeling scared and, lonely and just kind of like, what's going on? The sex ed in school wasn't super informative. I just remember feeling a lot of shame and embarrassment because it was in a class with a bunch of kids and boys and lots of laughing. And so I didn't feel educated and empowered. And it was pretty much just a non-event for me, actually, maybe even something that I dreaded having every month. And I remember thinking, like, this sucks. Why do women have to go through this and men don't? I didn't have a very positive experience. And I was early to go on the pill. When I was a teen, everyone was on the pill. All my friends were, whether you were having sex or not. And yeah, I went on the pill. I barely cycled for a year before I went on the pill, which is just now knowing what I know. It's like tragic to say that, but yeah, and I was on the pill for the next like 10 years of my life, and it wasn't a great experience, but I never connected that to the negative side effects I was experiencing, like depression and just a general very dark gloom over my life. And I didn't know that's what was happening. I kind of changed as a person, I felt. Yeah, suffered lots of migraines. And then fast forward 10 years and I went off of the pill basically after I got married to start having kids. So then I was very privileged to easily get pregnant, and I was pregnant and breastfeeding 3 babies until my early to mid 30s. So I had 3 kids. And so, yeah, just a very disconnected relationship with my body and menstruation and fertility. I probably didn't even speak that word once or twice in those years, was not on my radar.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thank you for taking us through that. I mean, that's like 20 years of your life
Mm-hmm.
right there. So I know we've talked about this a lot in the FAMM program, the idea of perfection. And it's interesting, the different points, I think, when women discover fertility awareness. I've heard from so many women in their like mid 30s. It's kind of it's almost like a slap in the face, right? Like when you're in your mid 30s and early 40s, when you like find all of this information, and all you can do is kind of look back at what you weren't able to do. And so I would just like to kind of hang out in that space for a minute, because I think that, I mean, the goal with the work isn't to make everybody who didn't know about it feel bad about it, right? We all of us, myself, yourself, we all do the best we can with what we know. And I think that like I was taking some notes when you were talking, and I just feel like I'm sure there was a lot of reasons why you felt that way about your period. I typed out what you said so I wouldn't forget. You said you dreaded your period, and you said you thought to yourself something like, this sucks. Why do women have to go through this? And I would imagine that there was basically no context provided to you around the period stuff. I think we're from a similar generation, and we're from the generation of like Midol and like I don't know, the curse and like, right. There was nothing. And I was sharing on a different interview that'll be aired probably a bit later than this one, where I can remember having a subscription to the YM magazine, like the Young Miss, and reading. It was always like the mortified, like the mortified. I don't know what the title. I don't remember what the title of that section was, but it was always the same story. It was always like someone caught you bleeding, or and it was all party. And this is like the only context for bleeding. So I'm interested to hear your comment on that. But I feel like the piece that I felt like kind of just putting out there was like, well, don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, we were all in that boat and no one gave us any reason to think anything positive of our cycles.
Yeah, I can't remember ever having a Nikki in my life now, you know, like that person that's like giving you just this completely different perspective on cycling and being a cyclical being. And it was not even a thing at all. I think you're right, all of the context and experience I had were from media, which is always, you know, a negative experience, and an embarrassment and shame from the girls in my class who did have their period. No one was talking about it. I think the class found out this young woman had her period and she was teased and bullied. And it was just like, that's what I remember. It's just the worst feeling, thinking about how embarrassed she was and how grossed out all the boys were. Mind you, I went to a pretty cruel school. I feel like when I think now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm just like, oh my, but yeah, never a positive experience. And my mom, she only knew what she knew, and her mom only knew what she knew as well. So yeah, it's been interesting. This process has definitely done a lot of healing for my mom and I as well, just our relationship going, you know, learning what I know now. But yeah, so I don't blame, but yeah, it's just incredible the amount of information that was not given. Even simple stuff, you know, but
I know it's crazy. And then I feel like there's a lot of things that I can relate to in different ways when you're sharing your story. So like I've shared this before on one episode or another, where my first experience with cervical mucus, like I didn't know anything about it, but it was like wet stuff in my panties, right? And so I remember just being like, Mom, my panties, like, right? Like I don't remember what I said, but it was like, what is this gunk? And then she just bought panty liners, and then that was the conversation. Like there, but then I can't look back at that and be like, she should have told. She did not know, and so there was no. She should have told me. That's not a thing. So when I think about that memory, now that I'm doing this work and things like that, you know, she finds it super interesting if, you know, when we talk about it, but it's not one of those situations that you can be like, oh, she should have told me, because she also had no idea, right? And there was something else that I resonated with. So I was thinking about this because I was thinking about like my own experience. I think now when I put the dots together, I think I got my period the month before my 14th birthday. I think that's what it was. So I can resonate. By the time you're almost 14 or more, or older, most of your girlfriends have already got them or told you they did.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you're sitting there like looking at the watch, like, okay, like, you know, got some breast buds, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm gotten older. I'm ready. Hello. What's going on? So I felt like I could relate to that aspect of your story as well.
Yeah. And I was also like really into sports. So I was a very active kid, and I likely wasn't eating enough. And, you know, I was very thin and just super active. So now looking back, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that I got it later than most people back then. Now I feel like that's different. Periods are coming a lot earlier these days, but yeah, so putting the dots together as well, now things make sense at why I was later. And yeah.
Well, and I think one thing that is also interesting is that the average age, I mean, of course, it could be shifting a little bit with the way things are now, but the average age of menarche is 13, according to the literature. So that's something interesting as well, because it feels very late as a lived experience when you are going through it and you're 14 and you get your period. But then from the perspective of like the averages and what's normal, It's actually right in there. But again, no one's telling us this.
Yeah.
And, you do know of the girls who are getting it at 10 and 11.
Yeah.
You don't really hear about the girls who are getting it at 14 or 15. And yes, many, if it's going on quite a bit longer than that, then absolutely it could be related to someone like kind of on that HA type of spectrum. There was one other thing I wanted to kind of poke into. I don't know if that's the best way to poke into, like ask about, like who taught me how to do interviews. But there was something else I wanted to ask about, which was your experience on the pill, because what I find interesting about doing interviews, and maybe also like, being an author, is I always like to kind of put back what your words were. And you said it was like you said it wasn't a great experience, and it was like there was a dark gloom over your life. I mean, wow, right? It's really interesting to hear how women describe their experience on the pill. Did you want to share a little bit about like strong words? So how so?
Yeah, well, looking back now, I can fully say I struggled with depression throughout that whole time I was on the pill, but I didn't know that's what it was. And it's hard to say that because I do hear stories from women that, especially, or young girls, they say, I went on the pill and I knew it wasn't right for me. I just felt right away wrong and went off. And I feel so envious. I really just wish I had known that was associated with what was going on. But I just never put two and two together and never associated the pill to having that, even though it probably says it on the 30-page side effect sheet. And I know now it's a side, but yeah, it was definitely an instant change from before the pill to after. Like before Christ, before BP and AP,
BP, AP, I love it.
But there's a definite shift now in hindsight. And yeah, I have some grief about that. That's a long time, 10 years, to be sort of a little bit lost in that darkness and not really know that it wasn't really me and that things could have been different. And I think that's where a lot of my passion and fire comes from, with making sure there's informed consent when it comes to knowing what you're putting into your body, how you're learning about your menstrual cycle, and just what you talk about, like that being that fifth vital sign, and it's pretty much speaking to you about its health and overall health. And yeah, so there's grief there, but also it, I think, made me so incredibly passionate about that. So I don't know if I would take that away, but yeah. And I remember even asking friends, like, do you guys feel this way? Do you feel this down all the time? And I don't really remember friends saying they did. So maybe I just had like a different experience, or maybe they just weren't comfortable or putting it together. But yeah, I remember knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what it was. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, Nikki, when I hear like it's hard. This is essentially the reason that I do this. And we were talking a little bit in the pre-chat of, why I love doing these interviews so much. You're not the only one, and we can only imagine how many women are in the same situation. And I mean, I've interviewed a lot of women who say similar things. And so the just being this way, feeling like something was wrong, not feeling like yourself, feeling like there was a cloud over you, or, there's so many different ways I've heard women explain it. And this is one of the reasons why I'm always going on and on and on and on about birth control, like seriously, because how many women out there have these feelings, but they don't, how would you make that connection? Like how? Because when you hear women who got out of it, it's often, it's often for women for whom it was like extremely acute, right? Like they're maybe having panic, like full on, like,
right.
So they're like, it's a much more kind of in your face type of scenario. Or like you said, the quote, lucky women who go on it and like immediately feel totally crazy inside. Like, I know that word crazy isn't the best word to use, but like, how else would you describe it if all of a sudden you're crying and then laughing and like depressed one minute? And like, I mean, I had friends personally who did have those experiences. I was meant to do this work. When I think about the types of experiences that I had and my friends had, and I was able to see this kind of stuff and hear the conversations from young. I mean, I witnessed a lot of this stuff in my 20s. Like I can think of one of my really, really close girlfriends, her boyfriend told her to get off of it. Because he was like, this is crazy. Like within like 3 weeks, because she was like crying and laughing and like 1 minute, like just he's just like, whoa, like, and he knew that she had just started taking it. So he was like, you need to. But anyway, like jokes aside, though, like
too, go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought. Sorry, I didn't.
There's a delay.
You. I was gonna say, I think too, the fact that I was like 16 years old, you know, like you don't even know who you are yet. And I didn't even have a chance to really get to know who I am and solidify and know that like, whoa, things aren't right. You know, so like 10 years, like 16 to 26, those are so formative. And I almost feel like I lost that. So I do think like being so young and vulnerable and unsure of so many things, and then on top of that, stopping hormones, like it's wild that I did that, and so many women do that, and it was just like blindly recommended. Like I walked into a teen health center without my mom, like with another friend, and we both just went on the pill. Like it was insane.
Well, and there was something you said I mean, a lot of what you said stood out to me, but there was something you said that stood out to me, which is that you did ask your friends about it and you knew that there was something wrong. And it kind of goes back to like, just as a friendly reminder that like with your 16 to 26-year-old self, it's not like you did nothing. Like you were kind of searching for those answers in the ways that you knew how to. So again, like you literally did the best you could with what you had. When I reflect back on my teenage years, no one, at least in my experience at that age group, no one talked about their periods at that age. When I think back to my closest girlfriends, like we eventually talked about our periods, but that was when we were older. So I was obviously into the charting and teaching women and, you know, all this stuff in my early 20s. And so that is when I was talking about this stuff with my girlfriends, but it was only because I was learning all this stuff at that time. Before I got into the fertility awareness space and I was teaching and all of that kind of stuff, I wasn't talking about this stuff with my girlfriends. So when you said, you know, I asked my friends about how they were feeling, whether they were feeling depressed too, and things like that, I also think at that age, we're kind of immature. And as much as you have your close girlfriends where you quote, tell them everything, you actually don't. If you think back, like, I mean, does this resonate with you? Because I feel like you don't. Like when you're in high school, you don't actually get in those deep conversations because you're so uncomfortable with your own self. You're not really talking about these things.
Yeah. I never talked about periods with my friends ever. So, and I feel like the point of the pill had nothing to do with us. It was totally, everyone was just terrified of getting pregnant. So it almost had nothing to do with our cycle. There was no conversations about cycles and any of that. It was mostly out of fear.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when reflecting back to how I was feeling when you were sharing your story about just sharing your experience with the pill and depression and not knowing. And I mean, it's incredibly sad. I was definitely moved by it. And again, this is why it's so important for us to continue in this work. When I hear just that story of and then I had all these panic attacks, and then one night I was like desperately Googling, and then I found a support group. Like this is unacceptable. But this is what it is, you know. And it's like you stumble on the podcast, someone recommends a book, and it shouldn't be like that. We should be having our healthcare practitioners should be going through the common side effects of these medications. They should be telling us depression is extremely common, so are sexual side effects. And so if you start to experience low libido, or if you start to experience whatever the list is, I'm sure you can go back and listen to the Pill Reality series for all 65 things. I mean, right? But like someone should be, but that's not how it is. So how do we fix it, right? So Nikki, like we this is how you
Yeah.
fix it, right? Like
Yeah.
we jump in, we do what we can to educate our peers. And what I love the most is that you have 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you were sharing your story and just kind of like that pain that you had to carry because of what it took away, like, right? I could just imagine how equipped your girls are, like whether they like it or not.
Yeah, and the what's really just coming to my mind now is talking about this. Like I'm like I put myself, I was like, would I even if let's say I knew all the side effects and I was very educated on all of those, would I still have done what I had done? And I think that just knowing what the pill does to us isn't enough. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about the education empowerment around really being creating a menstruating affirming world and environment so that young women are growing up with pride and knowing just how incredibly amazing and important having a cycle, ovulation and menstruation and being having those 10 years of 15 to 25 to move with your natural cycle, how incredibly important that is. And then educating on, well, this is what the pill would do if you took it. So they actually understand the risk and the loss. And it's not just these random lists of side effects that they don't really understand the seriousness of it if they don't know how incredibly beautiful and empowering and important being a woman and cycling is. So I feel like there's that before piece that's really, really important. And with my girls, it's not just one conversation. It's literally raising them in a like menstrual affirming home and trying my best to create a menstrual affirming world around them. So it's normal and that's their norm, and they're not like we're the normal ones talking about periods and around the dinner table and marking it on our calendar. And my husband's part of that conversation. And that's the norm for them. So when they consider, okay, what are my birth control options? Taking the pill is a big decision
Yeah.
because they know what it's doing.
Yeah.
So I think there's just so much before that, which is what I'm striving for in my work and in my family. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
As a women's health professional, you already know the value of tracking the menstrual cycle, but I'm guessing that you're not comfortable interpreting complex charts, weird mucus patterns, abnormal bleeding, or other similar situations. You're passionate about fertility awareness and want to use it in your practice, but you're just not sure where to start. That's where FAMM comes in. The next class of FAMM is just around the corner. Registration is now open for the Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. Classes start on October 4th. By the time you finish your FAMM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. And when you apply, we'll send you the details to join one of our upcoming information sessions. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Yeah, and I mean, I love it. I love it so much, and I feel like these are the conversations that I think we should have. And I find it funny. I mean, I don't get a lot of like hate mail. I think because I'm so specific about the menstrual cycle. Like I get nice, friendly people in my community. But like when I get pushback and stuff like that, it's kind of like, you're anti-pill. I mean, less so now. I feel like this was more when I first got into it. People, pill anti-feminist and all this stuff. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, I mean, having these conversations is the whole point, because we've talked about this in class as well, because we had a great guest speaker in the FAMM program this year who went into teaching teens, and it was amazing. But a piece of that conversation, because what I've seen now being in this field for so long is now I see women who've similar to you, had their own experiences on the pill, similar to myself. I mean, I used the pill also when I was a teenager, more so because I had heavy and painful periods. And so I was looking for an out because I didn't know any options other than that. But again, in my perfect world, I'm not saying, and no one should ever use the pill again. Like, that's not the point. In my perfect world, we would have a conversation. Like you said, it would be a big decision. We would have that conversation about, this is how your body works, and your body's amazing, and this is how it's supposed to work. And the pill, in case anyone didn't know, is the first drug that was ever created to give a healthy person to alter a perfectly natural process in their body. And that's a real thing. That's legit. Like, the pill was the first thing ever given to healthy people to like correct something that isn't a problem.
Yeah.
And so this is useful information. In my perfect world, we would talk about the side effects with real words. So we wouldn't, like, on the when it says like mood changes and like, right, like, we wouldn't say mood changes and make it seem so vague. We would explain what is common and what many women experience, so that if you did, Nikki, start to feel like, I'm not myself, I don't know what's going on, like, I never felt this kind of gloomy cloud thing before, I just can't shake it. If you actually felt that way and someone had told you that the pill could have that effect, you would have then had some choices. And maybe the choice would have been to switch to a different formulation. And obviously, a lot of women try that route, and like, some succeed and some don't, right? But like, you would have had more choices, because maybe it would have been like, I switched to this formulation, I tried something different or whatever. And if it really didn't work, at least then you could say, okay, well, I tried XYZ, I did what I could, it didn't make me feel better. Now what else is out there? And I feel like ultimately this is the point, right? Like, this is the whole point. So the question out of that, I mean, I'd love to hear your comment on that, but the question out of that also, you shared with us your journey, and then in terms of coming off the pill to conceive. And arguably, I feel like this is how like, in many ways, like, this is how the pill is supposed to work. Like, we're supposed to go on it, and then like, when we're ready to have babies, we're supposed to come off, and then we're supposed to be able to have babies, right? So I feel like that's actually a win, right? Like, that's like a positive, like, it did what it was supposed to do. I mean, unfortunately, there was like the 10 years of depression, but hey, right? Like, right. But jokes aside, I can't help myself. But like, but jokes aside, right? Like, I feel like, for me, I could just imagine many people listening to it and being like, why are they so down on it? I mean, she used it for birth control, and then she came off and had her kids. Like, isn't that the point? But now that we've got into the nuance of the side effects and how it affected you, like, that's why we're talking about it, right? So share with us then, like, when you kind of delved into fertility awareness charting, like, when you kind of decided to kind of, I'm assuming, like, shift to your focus a little bit more, to focus on the charting piece, and then add it into your practice.
Yeah. And for anyone who, thinks like, wow, that really worked out great. You came off the pill and were able to just have babies. And yeah, like, on paper for sure. But I definitely still struggle with depression, and I haven't been on the pill for so long. And I've read many studies and books talking about the correlation between that, and I'm not fully blaming the pill, but I feel like I just never had a chance to know what my body would have done for me if I had left 10 years of ovulation in my life and not taken it out. But yeah, so I was very, like I said, privileged. I don't take that for granted, that I was able to get off the pill and naturally get pregnant with 3 beautiful, healthy daughters. And even throughout that whole process, I was very disconnected. I was connected enough to be passionate about having home birth and breastfeeding, and trying my best to live this conscious, healthy life. But not a lot of it was focused on myself. A lot was on the kids and being the best mom I could be for them. And that took me into like my late mid 30s, still kind of having no relationship with my natural cycles. And when you finish having babies and breastfeeding, and you've been on the pill for 10 years, and then all of a sudden you're cycling naturally for the first time in your life at 36 years old, like, I was like, had no idea what was going on with the ups and downs of emotions, and yeah, just almost feeling like an alien in my own body after all of that. And I discovered Yeah, I read the book Wild Power by Alexandra Pope and Shawnee Hugo Wurlitzer, and they were my first entrance into the menstrual cycle awareness community. And I was hooked reading that book and really just learning about being how, because I kind of felt like a quote unquote crazy person my whole life, with never being super consistent and being really hot and cold and very emotional, spicy person, which is how people would have described me. And this book like validated that for me in the sense like, yeah, you're not the same person every day. You have a uterus. Like, this is you. And I was just like, whoa, like that concept was so incredibly grounding and beautiful. And yeah, I dove in after that and took their menstruality mentorship apprenticeship, and then was always attracted to like your podcast and your book, and lots of books on menstrual cycle awareness. And before I found FAMM, between like being a menstruality mentor and FAMM, I did have this dream of having like a red tent in my yard, this place where I could help women learn about this beautiful process of learning about themselves through their menstrual cycle, meeting their needs through their inner seasons and energies, and teaching about these things. And I did that. I started teaching workshops, and I guess I should mention I was a teacher before I had my children for 10 years. So I had a lot of experience in making programs and curriculum and teaching, and I'm an artist too. So all of these things just came together in teaching about this. And yeah, and then obviously having daughters, I started to create programs for mothers and daughters, teaching about menarche and the menstrual cycle and this relationship between mom and daughter. And then I don't know if you want me to keep talking, or if I should give you a chance to chime in.
I mean, I'm finding it fascinating. So I'm absolutely like continue sharing. It's I think for the listeners as well, it's really helpful and interesting to find out how we kind of fall into the professions that we fall into. And I know one of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times is that your personal experience of being on the pill for 10 years and being in that kind of state and not knowing it was related, and that fuels you and drives you. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that because I know that I can. And ultimately what fuels me, I often joke, and I don't know if it's funny, but that if I didn't have the podcast, you've heard me say it, I'm sure, I would be standing on the street with a sign and just screaming at the top of my lungs all the time. I mean, it's a joke, but it's like I'm that angry. Like when I hear you say that you were just suffering and like you didn't know, knowing that that's what I do this for, so that you have that information, so that you have choices. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you the choices and the information so that you can decide what's best for yourself, right? That's what drives me. So I feel like there's, yeah, definitely, it's very interesting and worthwhile for you to share kind of how you meandered into this work for sure.
Yeah, and that's almost what every single woman that comes to my workshops, or the moms and daughters that come, they all say the same thing. I wish I knew this. I can't believe, with that same passion and anger, I cannot believe we didn't know this. I didn't know this. So I'm just like, yeah, so of course. And I think so everything led one thing to the other, where I'm like, young women should know this, and they shouldn't know it in the sense of like you're saying, I'm not shoving it down their throat. It's this very inviting, comfortable, gentle, feminine environment where we're just talking and learning from each other, sharing experiences, and providing information and resources. And that's kind of how I started. It was more of the like psychological, mental lens about supporting through the inner phases of the cycle with what I learned from Red School. And it was so beautiful and empowering. And then, of course, after doing that for a few years, I'm often getting more and more questions and deeper questions and deeper curiosities about, well, what does this mean? Or what about this? Or how does this work? And I just never completely felt fully aware and educated on the kind of I call it like the masculine side of the cycle, which is the physiology of it and the science behind it, and what's going on with hormones and what that looks like over a lifetime. And so that fascinated me too. And I just really wanted to be a good support for the people who had these questions, especially girls and teens and moms. And of course, you were a mentor that I was casually stalking, like your podcast and your books. And yeah, just so I was, and I choose my mentors wisely. Like I feel like I've chosen the best of the best with Red School and having you in my corner. And I just was eyeing your FAMM program for so long. But I was quite intimidated by it because of your amount of knowledge and resources that you provide. And I felt like I didn't have I obviously don't have this medical practice. So I felt like I was a little bit of a different clientele for you because I wasn't necessarily serving clients, but I was like being a facilitator for many women and young girls in the community. And this knowledge would only just be incredibly wonderful to have as an addition to what I was already doing. So yeah, that's kind of where I not ended, but that's where I'm at now with being almost done your program. And yeah, I haven't looked back. It's just been so like kick ass. Am I allowed to say ass? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, it's been kick ass. It's a kick ass program. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I feel so, yeah, I want to be on street corner holding signs too.
Well, I think it's good to like productively channel the anger. And this is, I mean, it's been a real blessing to be able to do the podcast for so many years and to be able to even give voice to what I see behind the scenes. I think one of the things I really love about what I've created with Fertility Friday is that it's not just, I hear a lot from my clients behind the scenes, and it gives me the opportunity to share that. So it's only when you work with women day in and day out and you hear their struggles and experiences and stories, and you hear how profoundly these experiences, how profoundly negatively these experiences can affect your clients. It's only then that you really can get why a person would be questioning something like the birth control pill, or why we would be so angry that we didn't learn about our menstrual cycles, or it's really that. And so I feel like I've been very fortunate to be able to share these stories so that it's not just me hearing it. And it's really, as a listener, for those of you who are listening, who've listened to multiple episodes, or if this is your first episode, right, welcome. But this is what we're about here, because this is not about my opinion. This is about like you can have your opinion about whatever you want, but how are you going to listen to 100 women tell you the same thing about the pill and then just be like, oh, they're all like, no, they're not all crazy. Actually, no, they're not.
Yeah.
They're absolutely not. Well, I suppose as we start wrapping up today, we can shift a little bit then to your experience in FAMM. I mean, I know you mentioned a little bit about your background, and I remember we had a conversation before you jumped into the program, because you had gone through the FEMM training as well, which is another fertility awareness educator program. And I remember us having this conversation and you wanting to kind of marry the two worlds, which is certainly more of the, I don't know what word you would use, but like less scientific, more kind of like marrying that to the actual tangible information of the chart. Because there's certainly a lot to be said for how the cycle can affect you emotionally, understanding the seasons of the menstrual cycle, the seasons of your reproductive life. And it's so profound. It's an extremely important part of body literacy and menstrual awareness. Obviously, I go into the weeds about accurate cycle charting and research evidence-based and all that kind of stuff. And I think it is nice to be able to marry, like you said, the kind of feminine and, in your words, masculine aspects of the cycle. So, I mean, one of the questions I like to ask my practitioners is, for someone who is in a similar situation as you were, who has been working with women in a different capacity, whether it's as a women's health professional, or like in your case, you were working with women and teens within this reproductive health space, what would you want them to know about FAMM? And maybe to kind of tag on to that, how has this kind of, now that you're almost towards the end of the program, like how is this knowledge going to change the way that you are practicing?
My goodness, we need another 30 minutes. Yeah, well, first of all, in my confidence, I was just telling my husband yesterday that because I'm starting to finish up some of the assignments because we're coming to the end, and every single like assignment is 100% like tangible in the sense that I will use it again. I will refer back to it. The process of your whole course is so smart. Everything you had us do was exposing us to information that we will be using or going through a process that we will be using with clients. So it was just like, and there's no busy work, there's nothing that is not necessary. And so I really appreciated that so much, especially because I'm an unschooler and I want to like run away from the system of things, just busy work and just doing things to do things. Like that is not what your program is, which like we don't got time for that, like I need to be using what I'm learning. And that's exactly how your program is designed, which is so awesome. So I really appreciated that. And having said that, it was so going through all those processes through the assignments and the weekly meetings and all of the client case studies, I just feel like my confidence in what I actually know and how I can serve people has just gone from 0 to 10, maybe not 10, but 0 to like 8 the more I work with people. But just like we're in the weeds, you said, we're doing it. We're seeing all these beautiful cases and talking through all these scenarios, these real life scenarios, not like textbook charts. Like it was just everything about it fueled my fire and my want for more with the information. And yeah, and also just knowing like this is the tip of the iceberg. There's just so much room to continue learning with you. And yeah, I really, really value the relationship that you have as mentor with the people in your programs. And yeah, so I'd say confidence. And then the way it's changed or improved or added to what I'm already doing is that confidence, it's opened up the avenues at which I can support someone. I can marry the two within because as much as the science is important, also the spiritual, emotional aspect of our cycle is as well. And it's like one needs the other. And I feel like they're just an incredible balance between the two. Yeah, I'm excited about how it's going to add to my business and add to the Pretty River Red Tent in the way that because all women have different needs and what they want for their when they're going to work with someone for their cycle. And yeah, I just feel like you totally upped the quality of my business. So thank you, Lisa. Yeah, it was definitely a wonderful choice of me to invest in it. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's so amazing. Nikki, that's such a beautiful testimonial. I mean, thank you so much for sharing. And for anyone who's like, what's an unschooler?
Oh
So
yeah.
I homeschooled my kids for almost 3 years due to the interesting things that
Yeah.
happened with the COVID. And an unschooler, for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, I don't even know, maybe I did unschool, but it's just the concept of allowing your kids to learn a bit more freely, I would suppose, Nikki. Correct me if I'm butchering it, but the concept of kind of instead of being so rigid, like by this time and they have to do this and whatever, trusting that they're going to learn, like you provide a rich learning environment and then you're kind of following their, and anyone who's tried to homeschool their kids will know that like you can't force children to do things. So you end up unschooling anyways,
Yeah.
as soon as you go into the unschool. Anyways, so just in case anyone, and so I really appreciated that, what you said. And that's my goal, right? That's my goal with the FAMM program. It's always been about serving the woman in front of you. And so sometimes when things get complicated, or sometimes when I'm thinking about putting together whatever it is, a program or working with a client or whatever it always for me has to go back to why are we doing this? Why are we here? And I always reflected that in my work whenever I'm putting together anything. And at the end of the day, it always comes back to the same thing. I am doing this because I don't think that women need to continue to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
So then when it comes to the FAMM program, that was always my goal, And I think, just as a little side note for anyone who's kind of curious how the FAMM program came about, I mean, I was seeking, and I am seeking, and I think we've done it, to fill that void. There's different fertility awareness educator programs that are often designed for lay people, to bring a lay person to a fertility awareness educator. But what is there for the busy women's health professional who doesn't need to have necessarily modules and modules of background information on this and that, who's literally working with women right now, who needs to have the information to better serve them using the menstrual cycle as a tool. So anyways, I really appreciate your kind words, because that it's like such a okay, good. Because this is what I was going for, right? Like, this is everything I've designed has come directly from my client work and from the years of hearing clients say similar things. As you work in any field, you start to put things in categories. And so even though everyone's experience is unique, you start to see trends. And so the homework assignments reflect that, right? Like, it reflects the trends. So when you do the work, eventually someone's gonna be like, what? And sometimes it'll be the same question in the homework, which is
totally. And I think that having a life of unschooling, we live through learning and relevancy and curiosity. And I feel like your program is that, everything was relevant. There were so many different types of learning throughout your whole program. So I feel like you've just done such a good job of balancing that out, in the sense of what kind of learner we all are, and the types of information we're getting through video and handouts and studies and live meetings and then assignments. And then it was just such a great way to just learn this information. And I don't know, I would tell everyone out there, if you want to up your business, Lisa's your gal. It was such a great program. So I don't want it to end.
Well, I mean, yes, it's always bittersweet at the end, but of course we offer opportunities for it not to come to an abrupt end, as we continue to support you to apply the material in practice. So we aim to continue for those who are wanting to jump in and work on this with their clients right away. So again, in that same air of being very practical and what do they need now? Well, so thank you so much. That's a huge compliment. And I really appreciate you sharing that, especially on air with the listeners who may have been contemplating jumping into the program, because of course that's a concern. And many of us have taken programs where you're doing assignment on top of assignment, and you're just
why?
And then sometimes it's repeated work, and you're didn't I answer this question already? What is the purpose of this? And so obviously my aim was not to do that. But as we wrap up, Nikki, I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit more about what you do. So I'd love to give you a moment to share about your business. Let us know your website, any social media handles, any interesting things that you have going on, and we'll be sure to link all of those in our show notes page, and also on the show notes page. So for anyone who's on the go, they don't need to run off the road or whatever.
Yeah, so I teach in-person and online workshops. I focus on a big part of it is mother-daughter programs. I really want to empower not only the daughters, but the moms as well, because again, I'm so passionate about a menstrual affirming home, not just teaching it to a child, but having that mom think about their relationship with the cycle and what that looks like. Because that's our daughter's biggest influences, the way our moms are, the way the moms see their period and see that experience, and how open they are to actually visiting that and talking about it. So I do the mother-daughter programs, pre-blood, so before your bleed, and then post, I call them the bloods. It's like a cool cult. The bloods is an after you bleed program. They're both 5-week programs. And then I teach women workshops, cycle consciousness. And then I will be, once certified through the FAMM as a FAMM practitioner, I'll be offering, FAMM cycle charting and a little bit more of using the menstrual cycle as the 5th vital sign, one-on-one as well as group. And then I just started doing in-person full day mother-daughter red tents. So if anyone is from Toronto, Collingwood, Ontario, Canada area, I offer them in-person full day. So if you can't commit to like a 5-week with your daughter, you can come to the full day. And yeah, my website is prettyriverredtent.com because I live on the Pretty River, and I'm on Instagram. I'm a cyclical being on Instagram. I come and go as I please.
Oh, that's amazing. I was going to ask you where you are in the world so that for anyone who is listening nearby, because there are listeners all over the place, and I'm sure there are some listeners in that Collingwood and or Toronto area. So we are actually very close to each other. Maybe we'll be able to see each other in person one day soon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And the greatest thing I heard all day was the Bloods.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yes, I love it so much. Nikki, this has been just such an incredible conversation. I could talk to you all day. I mean, I feel like we could continue to go in the weeds for like the rest of the week. But seriously, though, this was such a great conversation. I love how many different places we went, and I'm really thankful that you came and shared your story. And I'm sure this episode is going to be so helpful for the listeners. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/486. I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation with Nikki. It was just such a treat to have her on the show, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I just feel like we hit so many important aspects. And what I love about sharing these reality series episodes, whether it's my FAMM Practitioner series or the Pill reality series or my Fertility Awareness Mastery Live series, where I do on-air client sessions, these episodes are giving you the real deal. These interviews show you what's really happening in women's lives. And I think the reason that my clients and practitioners appreciate these episodes is because then you can relate to them and you can also see yourself in them. It helps to normalize what happens in the real world so that you know you're not alone. Because I'm sure that when you're listening to these episodes, you can see yourself in the stories, because these are the stories of real women in their own words and not heavily edited. What's said in the interview is what's put on air. So I really appreciate Nikki for being so open with her story and being willing to share. And I always find it fascinating how our personal experiences really do guide what we choose to do in life. And it really gives us often the passion for our work. And so in Nikki's case, her experience as a teenager and not having those answers that she so desperately needed has now inspired her to work with teens and preteens to ensure that at least the teens who are attending her programs, and of course her 3 daughters, will just never have to live life without this information, which I absolutely love. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the FAMM Practitioner series, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on October 4th, so there's still time to reserve your spot. Apply now at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLive, and when you apply, you'll have the opportunity to join one of our upcoming information sessions for additional details. There are no other programs like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.